We've got questions on the War of 1812, the Hindenburg, the history of Iraq, and does Charles self-identify as a Tory? Welcome to another episode of Off the Menu, now being broadcast and podcast on the Crusade Channel. Talk radio the way it should be on crusadechannel.com. I'm your host, Vincent Franchini from Tumblr House, here with an aggressive Charles Coulomb.
Aggressive?
Yeah.
Aggressive?
Yeah.
That's just not true. I am the opposite of aggressive. I'm passive. I just, I still sit here and the universe uses me as its target.
I decided to put that because in the pre-show you kept using that adjective to describe Italian flavors. Oh, they like sort of this aggressive taste in wine, and
they do. They like really strong, aggressive tastes, like Dago Red. And they like really, really strong tomatoey flavors, I mean, if you want to turn off an Italian culinary audience, serve them with no garlic, no onion, no tomato. You know it's true. You're trying to punish me, but I'm telling you, there's nothing wrong with wanting strong, good flavors.
Okay, strong, good flavors. I like those modifiers. I don't know if I like aggressive.
Well, they are aggressive. I mean, nobody thinks of garlic as being subtle.
I mean, you can use varying amounts of garlic.
Yeah, you could use a tiny clip of a single clove. You could do that, but no one does, and certainly no Italians do. They'll mash cloves. You see the Italian garlic smasher. You can put in 2 or 3 cloves into that thing. You smash it up, and down it goes. The broken up garlic right into the food, and because it goes in like that, it's even stronger. A garlic press. That's what they call that.
Yeah, no, I have a garlic press. I don't know if it's as big as the one you seem to imply. But
oh, they're all huge. They're all huge. I mean, some of them you can put in a whole big clove and just smash them all in there. Okay. And some recipes call for the garlic skin as well as the fruit, the whole thing.
Wonderful. Okay, good. I'm glad you like all that. Okay, great. So
I do. I love garlic.
Yeah.
I mean, I it's an old French Canadian folk tale that when Adam and Eve left the Garden of Eden, they were allowed to bring 2 plants, the garlic and the onion.
I don't know if that's true.
Why? Were you not there?
I wasn't there, no.
And you don't think that garlic and onion are tastes of paradise?
Well, there's also basil, too,
Basil grew outside the garden.
Yeah. I love the way you said that with such authority and so casually.
So I knew something. Well, as our favorite life coach shows, you've just got to be able to assert things in a very calm, matter-of-fact way, and people will accept it. Like that.
Yeah.
You don't listen to it regularly, do you?
No, I don't.
Would you pay $200 to spend an hour with him getting life coach counseling?
I would want to pay $200 just to see what he does with another person at life coach counseling. So just as sort of like a movie to watch, rather than actually be helped and life coached.
So I could see us telling you that you have to accept who you are in the moment.
That doesn't mean anything.
You expect a life coach to mean something? You know, I have serious reasons to suspect how truly Californian you are. And that's the kind of question that makes me think, uh, I mean, you haven't been born in California, but you've got certain outside elements that you've got to watch carefully.
Yeah, I've got East Coast genes, so I'm a. I don't know. California, people are different here, so
Yeah, yeah, that's true. California it's like the capital of the 21st century. It's it's the last stand of the American dream. It's it's kind of like, well, if they tilt the country, all the all the people that aren't tacked down, they all end up in California seeking the dream.
I like
So
that. The
you,
last stand of the American dream.
that's right. That's right. Governor Newsom is proof positive. So are you looking forward to the build up to the election?
um, no. I think it's
No.
gonna be. I think it's gonna be uglier. I don't know what's gonna happen, but it's gonna be bad. I don't know what
You
happened.
know,
In the words of Mr. T in Rocky 3, what's my prediction? Pain. That's my prediction.
all right. Well, let me explain something to you. January is a very monarchical, a very monarchist month with Blessed Charlemagne and King Louis XVI and King Charles I and Money Prince Charlie all having their anniversaries in January. But February, that we're moving into, is a Republican month. Washington's birthday, Lincoln's birthday. These are what you have to focus on right now. Although, you know, the calendar is playing you kind of a trick at the moment.
How is that?
Because this year, the Christmas season overlaps into Septuagesima.
Mm.
Tomorrow is Septuagesima Sunday, the beginning of Shrovetide, pre-Lent, Carnival, call it what you want. And yet, the Christmas season will not be over until Candlemas Eve. So you've got this 2-day, 3-day overlap of Christmas and Carnival.
Interesting.
Well, are you going to be celebrating the two of them? Or?
Well, I mean, yeah, sure, absolutely.
I guess the real question that has to be asked is actually, how are you and your wife going to deal with the St. Valentine's Day, Ash Wednesday dilemma?
Is that how it is?
Yep.
Well, that changes my plan immediately because we typically celebrate afterwards, St. Valentine's Day. But if St. Valentine's Day, you enjoy that for some reason. I think you enjoy St. Valentine's Day coming on Ash Wednesday, especially, yeah, as a person in, a single person, you enjoy that.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah.
Well, you're wrong. You're wrong. Let me tell you, to me, Valentine's Day, St. Valentine's Day, is an extremely important day because it keeps the beautiful. I mean, we lose most of the Christmas stuff in the stores, but the red hearts and the red roses that are all over the place partly make up for it. And if you think I'll be happy to see them go and get replaced with Easter pastels, you're wrong.
Hmm.
And let me tell you something else, Mr. Smart Guy. What you could do is make Mardi Gras itself stand in for St. Valentine's Day this year.
We're probably gonna do that.
What you could do is take her to a Cajun restaurant for a touch of, St. Valentine's Day in Louisiana, darling. Have yourself a little gumbo,
Well, we don't have many of those here, but if we were in Louisiana, that would have been nice.
All right, fine. What you could do also is take her out on the following Sunday.
Yes, that's very true.
And you could declare that since you and she have both been so good about giving up everything you've given up for the first few days of Lent, you owe it to yourselves to enjoy it as though it were St. Valentine's Day.
Yes.
And you'd say, I enjoy the Ash Wednesday falling on Valentine's Day. That's just so untrue.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm here to help all my married and engaged and dating friends to make the most out of the day. But the most romantic thing you could do, of course, is go to Ash Wednesday service with your wife or beloved. And you'll know that it's a really liberal church if when they put the ashes on your forehead, they do it as heart-shaped.
That, I don't believe that, actually. Has that actually happened to you?
Not to me.
Okay.
I haven't I haven't had a wife to go with it. But wouldn't that be nice?
That wouldn't be nice, actually.
I mean, if he sees the couple, and he said, "Remember, my darlings, thou art dust, and to dust thou shalt return."
No, I'm not interested in that. All right, we're gonna move on to the questions. You're in the mood to punish right now. You're in the mood to punish. Yeah. Oh, that look on your face. It's like, yeah, I'm just gonna.
Why do you say things like that and in front of our audience?
Because they're true.
No, they're not true. They know our audience know I'm a nice person, basically.
Yeah, basically, most of the time.
Usually. As a general rule. No, I mean, think of it. We have been through 300 episodes, and a big reason for that longevity is my unrestrained niceness.
Unrestrained?
Yeah, my niceness is completely unrestrained.
I'll have to think about that one and the truth behind your statement.
Well, I'd rather you didn't. I'd rather you just accept it. I'd rather you just said, "Oh, okay," like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, perfect. Exactly. You see, that's the kind of acceptance I need.
Don't we all? All right. Question from Andrew from New Jersey. By way of Long Island, Connecticut respecter, Lower Hudson Valley enjoyer, dark academic. He says, hello, gentlemen, and greetings from the home of both Woodrow Wilson and Chris Christie. Proud to provide the country with scumbag politicians from both sides of the aisle. The great state of New Jersey. That's so good.
Listen. Everybody loves New Jersey. It's our 50th state, but the other 49 love the state of New Jersey. New York loves New Jersey. Pennsylvania loves New Jersey. Even Delaware loves New Jersey.
I feel like you took some sort of political speech and then just inserted New Jersey instead of the candidate. I feel like you did some old-timey politician thing there.
What? Let me tell you something. New Jersey is the Garden State, okay? New Jersey is the home to the Pine Barrens, Frank Sinatra. Basically, New Jersey is what it means to be American.
Okay, you're definitely getting political now. You're definitely just like...
Let me tell you, think of the wars New Jersey has seen our country through. During the American Revolution, New Jersey was its utter cockpit. Trenton, Princeton, Monmouth Courthouse. I mean, the struggle for freedom was basically decided in New Jersey. And that's not all. During the Civil War, New Jersey was at the forefront of keeping our country together and emancipating the slaves. The Spanish-American War. New Jersey once again stood up front and center for her sister states against Spanish aggression.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in World War I, when the Austrians were poaching our U-boats, it was New Jersey that stood up to them.
How's that?
What do you mean?
How did New Jersey stand up to the U-boats?
New Jersey stood tall.
New Jersey brought the fight to them.
Exactly. Exactly. In World War II, New Jersey showed the way for democracies everywhere. In the Korean War, what was it that stopped the Red Chinese at the 40th parallel? New Jersey. And at the end of it all, who brokered a peace agreement between the United States, South Vietnam, and North Vietnam? New Jersey. Whatever you look at in our country that's of value or of depth or meaning, scratch a little bit and you will find New Jersey.
Okay. What would be if you could decide New Jersey's slogan, like kind of what you did for California, the last stand of the American dream? What would you say for Jersey?
I would say New Jersey, the world in miniature.
Oh. Okay. Okay, well, I'm sure Andrew appreciates that.
Or I might say New Jersey, guardian of freedom.
The guardian of freedom. Okay.
You know, I wish you could look slightly more impressed. I really do.
Ooh, guardian of freedom. Yeah. Okay.
All right, that's better.
All right. So Andrew says, congratulations on 300 episodes. In honor of this milestone, I have provided a 300-person lightning round. Are you ready?
Sure.
Fortunately, I'm just kidding, but I do have a few questions.
All right.
Can Charles provide a background of the origins, causes, key moments, and figures of the War of 1812, or as we call it in New Jersey, Revolutionary War II, Electric Boogaloo?
Yes, well, Mr. Madison's dirty little war. Basically, there was a group in Congress, primarily in the South and West, called the Warhawks. And they included John C. Calhoun and Henry Clay. Basically, they wanted to annex Canada. Now, President James Madison, our fourth president, was very much in favor of all of that. And so, what should happen but the idea was hatched that they would invade Canada, which they figured would be an easy walk in the park. Now, at the time, both the French and the British were kidnapping sailors from American ships if they were born in French or British homeland or territories. So we elected to pick a fight not with the French, but with the British. And we declared war and then invaded Canada in three different places. Two columns in Ontario, one over Fort Niagara, the other from Detroit. And then we went up the old Conqueror's Road from Albany up toward Montreal. And we thought that would be a real easy peasy Japanese. Well, it didn't work out that way. All three columns were handily defeated, and then half of Maine was occupied. Now the British were very busy fighting the tail end of the Napoleonic Wars during all this period. So for a brief period of time, the United States were actually allied to Napoleon, although not officially. In 1813, we sent a force across Lake Ontario and burned Toronto, which was the capital of Canada. And so, then, in a lot of ways, the Canadian identity emerged from the War of 1812. Places like Queenston Heights, you had French Canadians, English Canadians, Scots Canadians, Irish Canadians, Welsh Canadians, American Indians, and the French all fighting together, and British troops, of course, against the American invader. When they burned Toronto, though, York, as it was called, revenge was wanted. So in early 1814, a naval task force went into the Chesapeake. He separated in two. Part of it went to try to take Baltimore, and they did not succeed in silencing Fort McHenry. And that was the occasion upon which Francis Scott Key wrote what became our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. Oh, say does that Star-Spangled Banner yet wave, of the land of the free and the home of the brave. The other part of that invasion fleet went up the Potomac, dropped off its soldiers, and they landed on the shore. They marched toward Washington at the place called Bladensburg. They were met by 500 Marines and 5,000 American militia. The militia fled, leaving the 500 Marines to their fate. They were defeated and captured, those who weren't killed. But as a result of the Battle of Bladensburg, the British marched into Washington and they burned it. But they spared the Commandant of the Marine Corps' house because of the bravery the U.S. Marines had shown at Bladensburg. And then they withdrew. And then the whole thing pulled out. The last major battle of the War of 1812 was fought in Louisiana in 1815. The British landed at the mouth of the Mississippi and marched inland, opposing the British, which was Andrew Jackson, with a ragtag group of followers, one of whom, with the pirates he brought in, was a man named Jean Lafitte. But the French people of New Orleans prayed to Our Lady of prompt succor for defense. The British were defeated in the Battle of New Orleans and forced to go home. But it didn't really matter because, unbeknownst to anybody, the peace treaty had already been signed, which basically retained the status quo. So all the invading and all the bleeding and all the dying turned out to have been pointless. But, as I say, Canada emerged in one piece. The Canadian song, "The Maple Leaf Forever," has a section in it dedicated to the second verse. The first verse of "The Maple Leaf Forever," in days of yore from Britain's shore, Wolfe the dauntless hero came, and planted firm Britannia's flag on Canada's fair domain. Here may it wave our boast and pride, and join in love together, the shamrock, thistle, lily, rose, the maple leaf forever. But the second verse is about the War of 1812. And this is basically, believe it or not, addressed to us Americans. At Queenston Heights and Lundy's Lane, our brave fathers side by side for freedom's home, and loved ones dear firmly stood and nobly died. And so their rights which they maintained, we swear to yield them never. Our watchword evermore shall be the maple leaf forever. The maple leaf, our emblem dear, the maple leaf forever. God save our King and heaven bless the maple leaf forever. A large part of the Canadian national feeling came from their combat with the Americans.
That makes sense
Yeah.
because they're still combative with Americans.
Well, yeah, except when they're phony loser puppets like Justin Trudeau and the whole of the Liberal Party of Canada, which has always been dedicated to delivering the country to the Yanks.
Beautiful. All right.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing, being treasonous to your country, especially if you're a prime minister and want to hand it over on a platter. I mean, you know, and this is something I feel very strongly about, the unreasonable demands people make of politicians. My native state of New York, some few years ago, had a governor who was literally driven from office because of consorting with prostitutes. And frankly, I was outraged that the people of the state of New York were so unkind and unfair to him. And when I was asked by media, you know, what do you mean by that? I explained, look, I'm a writer. I like hanging out with other writers. I can see why a politician would want to spend time with other members of his profession.
Oh.
What? What? I thought they were being terribly unfair. I mean, how would you like it if somebody said, "Oh, Mr. Franchini, you can't spend any more time with any more mega millionaires"? How would you like that, huh? Yeah, I didn't think so. It was an unconscionable violation of the governor's rights of free assembly with creatures of his own kind. And if they caught Justin Trudeau in a similar position, I would say the same thing. Birds of a feather flock together, and freedom is the right for them to muddy their own nests.
All right. What is the history of Iraq from just prior to World War I until 2003? I'm particularly interested in how the end of World War I influenced the direction Iraq would take.
Well, basically, Mesopotamia, as we have to call the place before it was called Iraq, was primarily Arabian, but had been conquered by the Turks early on. And it was part of the Ottoman Empire. Now, in World War One, the Turks joined the Central Powers, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Bulgaria, um, and almost immediately began to get pressure on all sides. The Russians pushed into Armenia, and the Commonwealth forces, the British Imperial forces, hit Gallipoli, but unsuccessfully, of course. But they also landed in what's now Kuwait. They led Lawrence of Arabia led the Arab tribes in a revolt against the Ottomans in the area called Hijaz, which is near Mecca and Medina. And with him was a Hashemite prince. Now, the Hashemites are a dynasty that claimed to descend from Muhammad, which is why they were the dominant tribal power around Mecca and Medina. So the Turks are driven out. And the Turks are also in 1916, 17, 18 driven out of Palestine. So the Ottomans are basically pushed out of most of their non-Turkish empire. Now, I mentioned Sharif Ali, who had been the great collaborator of Lawrence of Arabia. Immediately after the war, and he was proclaimed king of Syria for a short period. But immediately after the war, there was a movement by Saudi Arabia to expand. And they moved into the Hijaz, and the Hashemite king was forced out. So at the peace treaty, the League of Nations was established, and to the League of Nations were given certain territories, mandated territories they were called, to be administered by one or another colonial power. In the Pacific, where what's now Micronesia had been German, and also Northern New Guinea, those became League of Nations mandates, as did Southwest Africa, now Namibia, Tanganyika, now Tanzania, most of Cameroon, and the little country of Togo. These were all given to the British and the French to run, except Micronesia, which was given to the Japanese as a mandate to run under the League of Nations. Well, France was given the mandate to run Syria and Lebanon. Britain was given the mandate to run Palestine and Transjordan on the one hand, and Iraq on the other. So from 1918, you have the Kingdom of Iraq under the Hashemites. Well, things go pretty easy until 1938. 32, when before that time the Assyrian Christians were persecuted by the Iraqis, but they were still somewhat supervised because it was a mandate by the British. But in 1932, the Kingdom of Iraq became independent of Britain, and the king became totally his own master. In 1939, 1940, King Ghazi II expressed himself as being pro-German, pro-Axis. So he met with a car accident, and he was replaced by his young son, Faisal II. Faisal II was a little boy, but he was a teenager, turned 18 in 1958. At that point, they had a revolution, partly assisted from both Western and Eastern sources, which overthrew the king and murdered him, as well as his prime minister and crown chief, prime minister and crown prince was the same person. They were all murdered. The Iraqi Hashemites, except for a couple who were elsewhere, they were all wiped out. And then from 1958 until 1982 or 3, whatever the war began, Iraq went through several different Ba'athist leaders, but it was sort of personalist jockeying for power. Eventually, I said Barack Hussein. Hussein came to power, and he, not being a Shia Muslim, was a member of a minority group. And he ruled over Iraq until he was deposed by the United States invasion.
All right. Another question from Andrew, who says, I have heard different theories about how the Hindenburg was deliberately sabotaged by the oil companies, thus ending the age of the airship, which was far more luxurious, dignified, and energy efficient, and ushered in the age of the jet plane with its crowded rows of seats and inefficient jet fuel. Since the Hindenburg was last seen in New Jersey, this is of special interest to me. Has Charles heard of these theories? What does he make of them? Like so many conspiracy theories, it seems out there, but then when you look at the evidence, some of it kind of makes sense. In either case, what does Charles think the world would be like today if airship and Zeppelin technology was allowed to develop and advance alongside jet technology? Would we all be living in an Art Deco themed utopia?
Well, of course, we'd all be living in an Art Deco themed utopia if such a thing were possible, though I'm not sure it was. I'd love it. But no, I really have not heard of that. What I do know for certain is that because of the growing political struggle between the United States and Germany in the late 30s, the United States, which had a monopoly on helium, refused to sell helium to the Germans for political reasons. And as a result, they were stuck with hydrogen, which is extremely flammable, and which in fact caused the destruction of the Hindenburg in New Jersey. So, if you're looking for a conspiracy against the Hindenburg, you probably should start with FDR.
Hmm. I kind of don't buy into this. I mean, how did Andrew say it? If Zeppelin technology was allowed to develop and advance, who can be so powerful as to suppress technological advancement of everyone, not just in the United States, but across the world?
Well, pardon me, you'd be surprised at the force of suggestion and public cancellation and so on. I mean, the Hindenburg disaster was a real, coupled with the growing political problem between the United States and Germany. It was a 1-2 punch. If the Hindenburg had helium and it successfully completed its mission, the next step was for regular Zeppelins to go from Lakeshore, New Jersey, where the Hindenburg went down, to Los Angeles, California. And if you've ever seen if you've ever been inside our city hall in downtown LA, if you've ever been outside at night, you'll see the red beacon. That beacon was intended as a guide for Zeppelins. And you go all the way up to the top floor of the city hall. It's a round room. Now they use it for conferences and all that, but that would have been the depot for the Zeppelin.
It still doesn't make sense to me because any conspiracy wouldn't that be personal or something or based on that time?
As I say, Roosevelt, because of his increasing dislike and distrust and fear of Nazi Germany, nixed their getting helium.
Yeah, that's one person in one decision.
Yeah, but it's a very important one. It was based on a desire to shut down Germany's near monopoly of the Zeppelins, and it succeeded. You know, had he not done that, had the Hindenburg been filled with helium, it would never have exploded if it had an accident.
Well, don't you think it's a lot easier to avoid sort of? I mean, that's a very specific supply chain disruption, so to speak, right? You can only get this element, this helium, from the United States. I don't think that's the case nowadays.
Well, it's not the case nowadays, but you know, the world has moved on. I mean, because of the automobile, all real development on bicycles pretty much stalled. And the bicycle of today is very much like the bicycle of 1912.
I mean, I just don't understand the argument. I don't understand what's being said here. I mean, if there's a buck to be made,
they don't. The mere buck to be made is not always the only motivation. And as I say, I've not heard of the conspiracy he refers to, but what I do know of a certainty is that Roosevelt denied helium to the Germans to put the kibosh on the Zeppelin industry. That was a political decision, and nobody denies it.
Okay. Okay.
If that makes Roosevelt responsible for the dead of the Hindenburg, well, if the shoe fits, eat it.
Okay. I guess I come from a biased perspective because I've heard stuff like this before where it's like, oh, how come we haven't cured cancer? You know, like, oh,
Well,
how come we repress that? Because there's more
that's
money involved in treating it. I kind of
that,
don't, you know
that's
what I mean? Like,
that's much I do, but that's a much wider field. We're talking about a very specific one. I mean, similarly, nobody denies that the reason General Motors bought the red cars was to close them down and force the Angelenos to buy automobiles. There's absolutely no question about that. I mean, they knew what they were doing. They saw huge potential in the motor car in Los Angeles. The problem was that Los Angeles had one of the most effective uh, public transportation systems on the planet at that time. So what do? Well, you get rid of it.
okay.
And,
Question.
and again, that's not a deep dark shock or surprise. They were in a position to buy it. They bought it, and they eliminated the competition. I mean, that's how you get huge companies. That's how it's done. If that didn't happen, then you'd have a whole bunch of ma and pa stores instead of what we have.
Well, it's exactly on the basis of those huge companies who are just interested in profit, which is why I'm saying that. How do you suppress the Zeppelin technology? It's exactly for that reason.
Well, again, the problem was that by the time the war was over, see, you got to bear a few things in mind. What really um, killed the Zeppelins at that time, at that moment, were two things. One was the political situation, the denial of helium, and then the onset of World War II. Now, had they not, and of course, with World War II, flight technology became everything with airplanes because of the vast numbers of bombers and fighters being made, and the technological advances. The jet plane came out of World War II. With those technological advances, the whole Zeppelin thing was left in the lurch. And by the time the war was over, there was who would do that? There wasn't even a question. It's that the moment came and the moment went. But had that not happened, had helium not been denied the Germans, and had the war not broken out the way it did, then Zeppelin technology would have gone along, the route it was going along.
Hmm.
But because it happened when it happened, it was completely outdone. And by the time the war was over, nobody was interested in Zeppelins. I mean, similarly, the development we had jet fighters at the end of the war. Within 10 years, you begin to have them in commercial flights. Now, what did that do? Well, it ended up dooming transatlantic passenger travel and ultimately uh, continental, as far as the United States went, continental train travel because it's cheaper and quicker to take a plane than to take a ship or a train.
Hmm.
Now, again, had that not happened, had aeronautic technology, specifically regarding airplanes, not been forced ahead by World War II, who knows where it would have gone? Who knows how soon we would have had jet transports? We probably would have had them sooner or later, but who knows how soon? And it would have been a very different environment into which they came.
Okay. Okay. Question from Dylan who says, "Hey guys, lately I've been learning more about the Orthodox Byzantine Catholic churches and how they were oppressed by the Ottoman Empire for centuries. I read on one Orthodox Christian website that the passing down of the faith faltered among both the laity and clergy during this time. How did the Eastern churches preserve their liturgies, traditions, and theology during this time?"
It wasn't easy. But one thing that occurred was that in the Ottoman Empire, they had what was called the millet system. And what that meant was that each religious community that was tolerated, other than the Muslims, the Sultan was the head of the Muslim religious community. He was also the Caliph. And he was the head of the Nation of Islam. But the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Constantinople was the civil head of the Greek Orthodox of the empire and responsible to the Sultan for their behavior, which is why during the first Greek revolt in 1824, the Sultan had the Patriarch of Constantinople hung in front of his own church. That was his way of punishing him for allowing his people to revolt. As different churches, as areas with different churches were conquered, the heads of their churches became the heads of millets too. The Armenians, then the Catholic Armenians, the Greek Orthodox Patriarch of Antioch, and then the Catholic, the Melkite Patriarch of Antioch, the Maronite Patriarch of Antioch, the Syriac Orthodox Patriarch of Antioch, and the Syriac Catholic Patriarch of Antioch. All of these men became the civil heads of their people in Turkey. So how did they preserve their religion? The religion, well, they preserved it because they were able to. They preserved it because if those who were willing to pay the tax and to accept a position of servitude, basically, did not convert to Islam and accepted the fact that they just weren't going to go very far in this life, they were the ones who kept it all going.
Hmm. All right. Philip has a very interesting question. He says, "I want to ask you how veridical are the stories of Masonic infiltration in the church, not so much as regarding to the modern influence of liberalism in the church, but of actual Masonic lodges or members conspiring to hurt her and their actual practice of Satanism. I'm asking because it was brought to my attention by a friend that a story I held to be true was actually a hoax, the Taxiel hoax. So now I'm left wondering how much of these stories, rumors, and confessions by so-called former Masons are true."
Well, unfortunately, that's not a question I can easily answer because I'm not a Freemason. And their oaths are pretty, especially the higher up you go, their oaths are pretty rough in terms of revealing anything. It's really,
What does that mean? The oath is rough.
well, I mean, they have oaths that say, if I should reveal the secrets given unto me, may my liver be cut out of me and may I be laid on the seaside, and it's just horrible stuff. And I, not being privy to those secrets, I'm not in a position to say. As far as Satanism and all that kind of thing goes, the problem with a secret doctrine is that it could be anything. I wouldn't be surprised if it were Satanism, especially given some of the things that come out of Freemasonry, but I don't know. And the only person who would know is someone who has taken the oath. The only person who would reveal it is someone who didn't mind violating the oath. I haven't taken it, so I can't reveal it. Leon Taxilo, him I know about. And he was a Freemason who wanted to bring the church in France into disrepute. So he went through a phony conversion. And then he found this chick who either was or was not named Diana Vaughn. and she claimed to be the descendant of an old Welsh Catholic family, uh, but claimed that she herself had been initiated into the occult and to Freemasonry and all this kind of thing. Because Texil knew that Orthodox Catholics often have a weird desire, shall we say, with regard to the occult, to know that it's all around us, ready to pounce. Kind of like certain people being accused of being occult infiltrators. And yet, what does that really mean? What are they going to do? What are they going to accomplish? Those questions don't get asked or answered. At any rate, so Texil had his real or imagined girl, we don't know for sure, write a series of confessions that appeared in major French Catholic magazines, in which she declared there was a plot against the church by the Masons, and came up with all sorts of bizarre details. And then finally, when some of the most important Catholics in France had signed off as to the authenticity of this stuff, Texil emerged and said it's all phony. None of it's true. And you guys swallowed it. So it was made to discredit the church, and it worked. People fell for the bait right and left. When I wrote my phony confessions of a Catholic occultist, in the first paragraph, I say that I'm writing this in the spirit of Diana Vaughan, which a person knows if you know what you're doing, if you know about this stuff, it's a fake, it's a phony. But you see, part of the problem, and mind you, don't get me wrong, I don't think Masonry is a good thing at all, precisely because the liberalism and so on that our questioner asked not to go into. Because, see, that's measurable, that is tangible. But conspiracies are not. Secret societies are not tangible. I mean, it's like with the Rosicrucian myth. Uh, the fellow who wrote the book in 1614, I think, The Chemical Marriage of Christian Rosencreutz, that thing was taken up all over Europe. Everybody believed it, and it may or may not be true, but there has simply not been this age-old society of Rosicrucians, with all this wisdom and knowledge. It's not true. Uh, it doesn't mean there isn't in Freemasonry there isn't a certain evil orientation, but again, for the vast majority of Freemasons, that's the liberalism of the sort that we've described. Anything beyond that, any deep, dark, secret rites and rituals, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. You know, I don't know, and only someone who's initiated would know. And if someone converts and tells all, then the question is, okay, how sincere are they?
This leads into a topic which we've talked, I think, about several times. Old fans of the show will know this, but new fans won't, so I'll bring it up. With this topic, my mind immediately goes to Malachi Martin, Windswept House.
Yeah.
Immediately. And to just describe it for those of you who don't know, it's a 1996 novel by former Jesuit priest Malachi Martin. And Windswept House, the plot is it describes a satanic ritual, the enthronement of Lucifer, taking place at St. Paul's Chapel inside Vatican City on June 29th, 1963. The book gives a depiction of high-ranking churchmen taking oaths signed with their blood, plotting to destroy the church from within. And it kind of goes on with that. Now, Malachi Martin, he was asked about this. Like, is this true? Because this is a novel. This is a nonfiction novel, quote unquote. And he's quoted on Wikipedia as saying, roughly 85% of the fictional characters mirror real people, and roughly 85% of events in the book mirror real events, except those which are obviously mythic, such as the final stay of the Slavic Pope in Poland. We are talking about real people and real events, masked in the form of a novel. Nowadays, it is called a faction, a term coined by Norman Mailer, but an art form really created by Taylor Caldwell. End quote.
Huh.
So what is... I mean, obviously that this makes one raise their eyebrows a little bit. That's what Malachi Martin says. What does Charles say?
Well, again, Charles wasn't there. Charles doesn't know. Charles knew Malachi Martin and would not be at all surprised if it turned out to be true. But again, I wasn't there. I mean, Malachi Martin had a lot of interesting and important information that I lack. I wasn't in Rome during Vatican II. I was sitting in my parents' home in New York, staring at the black and white TV scene. And you see, people tend to, and I have no reason to think, by the way, that Father Martin lied. I have the utmost respect for him. But I am not in a position of my own knowledge to confirm or deny any of it, except that as an historian, all I can measure is what I have a fairly good idea of being able to prove. And the most offensive, horrific thing about Freemasonry has been its political opposition to monarchy and its political opposition to the church via what we call liberalism. And that liberalism ultimately is expressed in the phrase conduct over creed. It doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're a nice person. That is the heart of Freemasonry. And by that stance, the vast majority of people living today are Freemasons.
So the point being, regardless of the conspiracy, the big thing is what you've just talked about.
Yeah, I mean, that is the danger. And we don't like to look at that because all of us, to a greater or lesser degree, believe that. You know how you can tell?
How?
You consider yourself a trad, but you flinch when you read the Athanasian Creed, or you flinch when you read about the Inquisition.
I forgot about the Athanasian Creed.
What's that?
I said I forgot about the Athanasian Creed, actually.
Well, you shouldn't. It's one of the four we're supposed to believe.
That's right. Nicene Apostles Athanasian, and I thought there were two other creeds. I thought it was...
No, this one that you have to believe. The other one is called the Tridentine or the Creed of Pius IV.
That's what I was thinking of, where it went into different things. Yeah.
And then Paul VI came up with his Credo of the People of God, but he didn't give it any real authority.
What was the last one? Was it of Chalcedon? What was it?
Credo of the People of God by Paul VI.
Oh, okay. I thought there was another early Christian creed in there or something. Okay.
So those four: Apostles, Nicene, Athanasian, and Tridentine / Pius IV. That is what every Catholic must believe.
Yeah, You're and to get more specific, you're talking about the Athanasian Creed, where it says, "But it is necessary for eternal salvation that one also believe in the incarnation of our Lord Jesus Christ faithfully." What was the other one?
Where does it start? Whoever, quicumque vult, whoever wishes to be saved.
It's a kind of a long creed.
Yeah, I know. I don't say read it all. I say just read the first two sentences.
Okay. Whoever desires to be saved should above all hold to the Catholic faith. Anyone who does not keep it whole and unbroken will doubtless perish eternally. Now, this is the Catholic faith.
And then it goes on.
It goes on, yeah.
Now, that is the opposite of conduct over creed.
Right.
And believe me, nobody likes it. We prefer an issue of salvation that's more user-friendly, more adjusted to us and who we are, and our modern 21st century ways of looking at things through our own perfect lens, our own perspective, which discounts the murder of infants or the elderly or the sick. We don't have a problem with that. But the idea that maybe what you believe contributes to your eternal salvation or not, that we don't like, because we're good people, we're nice people, we're loving people, we're full of crap people.
What poet said we are the straw men? Or we are the hollow men?
Eliot.
Yeah, we talked about him last week.
Yeah,
he's pretty decent.
We sure did. We're basically full of bull. Propagandists from the top to bottom. BS artists. That's what we are. But we feel good about ourselves. So that's very important. That's why, if you want to look for Freemasonry, don't worry about the plots in the lodges. Worry about what's in your own head that you've picked up from them. 9th, 10th, 11th hand.
All right. Final question for the episodes from James, who says, I have watched some of Charles's podcasts from time to time, and I always get the sense that you are a Tory, by which I mean someone with the intellectual, social, and moral tradition of Toryism, not a member of a specific political party. Would you describe yourself this way? And if not, why not?
Well, you cut out on me, but I think now this is from James Wilson, UE, yeah? Well,
basically, are you a Tory? And by this, he means the intellectual, social, moral tradition, not the political party.
Before I answer that, I've got to explain something about our questioner, whom I do not know, but whose post-nominal initials, UE, I do know.
Oh, I didn't mention that. That was kind of a pre-show mention. Yeah, this gentleman had initials UE after his name.
Now, what that refers to is unity of the empire. In the aftermath of the American Revolution, those faithful Americans who left the country and lost everything because of their loyalty to the king were allowed the right to write UE, Unity of the Empire, after their name. So Mr. Wilson is a direct descendant of at least one person who suffered grievously for opposing the revolution against the king under whom he was born and to whom he has sworn allegiance. Those people were called loyalists or Tories. So now, having said that, what is a Tory? Well, the origin of the term actually goes back to the Restoration. After Oliver Cromwell, having gone to politician heaven, he was replaced by his son, who reigned a year and wasn't really good at maintaining the family business, the dictatorship over the three kingdoms. And so he was replaced, and General Monk declared the Restoration. Charles II came back and became king. Under Charles II, the two factions they call Whig and Tory began to emerge, and the names were not nice. A Tory originally was one of the Irish guerrillas fighting for James II after he was overthrown in the first successful invasion of Britain since 1066, 1688. He was overthrown, and his supporters were called Tories after the Irish bandits. But the opposing side, the Whigs, who supported the usurping king, William of Orange, it comes to Whigamore, and that was a sort of a sheep stealer in Scotland. So Tory and Whigamore, neither of them were what you would call laudatory terms. But what did the also they were called Jacobites. In the beginning, Tories were Jacobites, Jacobites were Tories. As the years went by, and the likelihood of the House of Stuart being restored became less and less. And mind you, both sides found their roots in the two sides who had fought the Wars of the Three Kingdoms. So the Tories ultimately derived from the Cavaliers, who fought for King Charles, and ultimately the Whigs derive from the Roundheads, who fought for Oliver Cromwell. But it wasn't completely straight. There were some supporters of Charles I and Charles II who defected to William of Orange. But nevertheless, that's the basic way it got started. So, what did they believe? Well, after the Jacobite issue sort of receded, there were nevertheless Tories who were not Jacobites and yet maintained the Jacobite attitude toward what the monarchy and the state church should be. So Samuel Johnson wrote one of the first dictionaries of the English language, and he defined them very amusingly. So, for instance, this was in his, and Samuel Johnson was a great man and a Tory. So this is from his dictionary. Tory, one who adheres to the ancient constitution of the state and the apostolical hierarchy of the Church of England, opposed to a Whig. And then you turn to Whig, and it says the name of a faction. So, but that pretty much sums it up. Basically, the Tory believed in a strong monarchy above the Jacobite, of course, wanted to see the Stuarts restored. The Tory wanted to see the monarchy itself restored, although they wouldn't mind the change in dynasty. But they wanted the monarch to once again have a primary role in the direction of the kingdoms. They wanted the Church of England. And so here you come into an interesting thing. Remember that when the Church of England was created, it took up the role in society that the Catholic Church had in the Middle Ages. without having the independence of the Catholic Church. So, whereas before, in addition to the roles of community center and carer for the poor and indigent, which is why when they got rid of the monasteries, care of the poor fell on each parish. And that was why he came up with the old phrase, when someone was broke, they'd say he's on the parish. Well, meaning he would get basically fed at a parish workhouse, a la Oliver Twist. And that sort of thing survived into the 19th century. But that side of things belonged by right to the Catholic Church. The Church of England occupied it. Bishops in the House of Lords, um, state support financially to some degree. All that was the establishment of the Church of England. That's what it meant to be an established church. They had taken over all of the churches in Ireland and established the Anglican Church of Ireland, which is the established church in Ireland, which is why all the medieval churches over there belong to the Anglicans today. But when the Church of Ireland was disestablished, they lost a lot of their property and their governmental backing. That was in 1869 that happened. But the phrase disestablishment sounds like it was abolished. It wasn't abolished, but it lost its role as the established church. In our own country, after the Revolution, the Episcopal Church was established in South Carolina, and the Congregational Church in Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. In each of these, it was overthrown. Uh, in 1818, there was a big, big fight in Connecticut about disestablishing the Congregational Church. One of the leaders for disestablishment was a man whom you know in another context, P.T. Barnum. But
Yeah.
that's how he got his start, was waging the political campaign against the establishment of the Congregational Church in Connecticut. And it's also, incidentally, where we get one of our longest words in English.
Anti-disestablishmentarianism.
Exactly. That's what it means. It means someone who is opposed to the disestablishment of a church. Now, I mention this because for the true blue Jacobite, for the recusant, uh, the hope, the dream, is to see the Catholic Church once again occupying the place of the Church of England. But in the meantime, until and unless that should ever happen, he would want the establishment of the Church of England to remain so that there's something there for the true church to one day occupy, if you see what I mean.
Yes.
Whereas if you simply disestablish the church, then there is no established church, and the state is a liberal state without any connection to any kind of Christianity whatsoever. And the idea of the Catholic Church regaining the place in society that it is its by right becomes impossible to even to conceive, as was the case with the Fathers of Vatican II, looking at the American structure of church and state. So for the Tory, even if he's Catholic, he would tend to uphold the establishment of the Church of England, not because he loves the Church of England, but because he believes that society needs an established church. If he's Catholic, of course, he hopes that one day we'll be taking that role over. And at the same time, unlike the Church of England, once again, a re-established Catholic Church in England or Scotland or Ireland would be able to play the role of the conscience of the king, which it obviously couldn't if the king is supreme governor of the Church of England, as opposed to the head layman. If you see that
Right.
difference.
No, definitely.
Because by his coronation oaths, the king was obligated to protect and help the church and to defend it against heresy and so on. That was his obligation by the coronation oath. But when he becomes the supreme governor of the church, that all changes.
Did they say that last year? Did he
Supreme
say that?
governor? Oh yeah.
To defend the church against heresy.
Well, I think that was taken out. Um,
That that
actually.
that would have that would have perked up my ears a little bit if I heard that. And I don't remember us discussing that because I feel like it would have came out on the show.
Well, let's see. Coronation oath changes to the coronation oath. Uh, uh, yeah. So the Archbishop of Canterbury says to King Charles I, Sir, will you grant and keep, and by your oath confirm to the people of England, the laws and customs to them granted by the kings of England, your lawful and religious predecessors, and namely the laws, customs, and franchises granted to the clergy by the glorious King St. Edward, your predecessor, according to the laws of God, the true profession of the gospel established in this kingdom, agreeable to the prerogative of the kings thereof, and the ancient customs of the realm. And he says, I grant and promise to keep them. Uh, then the Archbishop says, Sir, will you keep peace and godly agreement according to your power, both to God, the Holy Church, and the people? I will keep it. Uh, and then he says further, Sir, will you to your power cause law, justice, and discretion, in mercy and truth to be executed in your judgment? I will. Then the Archbishop says, Sir, will you grant to hold and keep the laws and rightful customs which the commonalty of this your kingdom have? And will you defend and uphold them to the honor of God, so much as in you lieth? And he says, I grant and promise so to do. Then uh, he says, Our Lord and our King, we beseech you to pardon and to grant and preserve unto us and to the churches committed to your charge all canonical privileges and due law and justice, and that you would pretend and defend us as every good king in this kingdom ought to be protector and defender of the bishops of the churches under their government. The king answers, With a willing and devout heart, I promise and grant my pardon, and that I will preserve and maintain to you and the churches committed to your charge all canonical privileges and due law and justice, and that I'll be your protector and defender to my power by the assistance of God, as every good king in his kingdom in right ought to protect and defend the bishops of the churches under their government. Well, obviously, the king was able to say that, but uh, in uh, the coronation oath of 1688 changed to, Will you solemnly promise and swear to govern the people of this kingdom of England and the dominions thereto belonging, according to the statutes in Parliament agreed on, not the laws of St. Edward, and the laws and customs of the same? Will you, to your power, cause law and justice and mercy um, to be executed in all your judgments? And then lastly, will you, to the utmost of your power, maintain the laws of God, the true profession of the gospel, and the Protestant Reformed religion established by law? And will you reserve unto the bishops and clergy of this uh, realm and to the churches committed to them all such rights and privileges as by law shall appertain unto any of them? Uh, and so it goes. There was several changes. Um, the religious element was changed, and it said this: Your Majesty, the church established by law, whose settlement you will swear to maintain, is committed to the true profession of the gospel, and in so doing will seek to foster an environment in which people of all faiths and beliefs may live freely. The coronation oath has stood for centuries and is enshrined in law. Are you willing to take the oath? So that was a little bit different, wasn't it? Anyway, uh, so That was what a Tory was in England in the when George III came along. I mean, they were pretty much destroyed, even though they weren't all Jacobites by the Jacobite defeat. And the Tory party and Toryism became basically a rejection of most of the governments of the day through the latter 18th century. And that was the case until George III came along. Because George III, the first of his house to glory in the name of Britain, believed in what the Tories believed in. And so people like Samuel Johnson, etc., felt that they could embrace their loyalty to this king in good conscience. And his adherents politically came to be called Tory. In the colonies, as the little Whig oligarchies in each colony went through their efforts to seize control, their opponents were called loyalists or Tories, including our friend Mr. Wilson's forebear of forebears. They were defeated, of course, and 100,000 of them had to leave. And they went to Anglo-Canada, to Quebec, to the Bahamas, and to Sierra Leone in Africa. But the loyalists in Canada established a very firm Tory tradition in Canada. And that continues to this day. In Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa is a little different because you didn't have much of a Tory tradition per se amongst the first convicts in Australia, and that's why, except for the very early days of the Australian settlement, there has not been a Tory party per se. You have the Liberal Party versus the Labour Party. And you've got something in New Zealand, I think it's the National Party versus Labour. In South Africa, uh, the political scheme before it became a republic is basically divided between Afrikaners who wanted a republic and British and Afrikaners settled and living in South Africa who wanted to retain the monarchy. So you might call them Tories in a sense, but at any rate, one of the things that became bound up with Toryism over the course of the 19th century, in addition to the monarchy and the establishment of the church, was the empire itself and its maintenance. So it wasn't true of all Tories. I mean, you had some quote unquote little Englanders like J.R.R. Tolkien, who was, and again, as Mr. Wilson points out, the party labels aren't really helpful. What happened in the early 19th century was that the terms Tory and Whig came to be replaced by conservative and liberal. There was a group of Tories called Young England who were very, very closely connected, partly to the early Oxford movement that brought us Anglo-Catholicism, and partly to the Cambridge converts who came directly into the Catholic Church. But Young England also had a member named Disraeli who would end up being prime minister and a power in his own right. But Disraeli's first comment on the birth of the Conservative Party was, yes, a conservative government, I see. Tory men and Whig principles. But nevertheless, the empire tended to be connected to Toryism. And as years went by, in the dominions in Canada, South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia, maintaining the tie with the mother country and maintaining the monarchy came to be seen as a conservative sort of thing. And lastly but not leastly, from that developed Imperial Federation, which was the idea of unifying Britain and the dominions, the settler colonies. I mean, unifying them on a standard of equality. In other words, you'd have an imperial parliament to which they'd all send representatives in London. Um, each of them would have their own parliament, of course. And then some people had because remember, through the 19th century, you've got the Irish problem. And some people came up with what was called home rule all around, which meant that not only would Ireland have home rule and its own parliament, but so would Scotland, Wales, and England. And some of these folk combined, plus a general parliament for all of them. So some people combined home rule all around with Imperial Federation. And the idea that England, Scotland, Ireland, Wales, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa would be equal partners in the empire, with one imperial parliament, one imperial government, and of course, the shared monarch. Today, you still have people of that point of view, although it's sort of updated. They call it Kanzuk now. You've seen that phrase, Kanzuk?
I've seen it from time to time. Can't suck.
Kanzuk, Canzuk.
Yeah.
And that's the idea of again the three remaining major dominions and Britain in an integral union, because it's pointed out that none of them, both Britain toward Europe, Canada toward the United States, and Australia and New Zealand toward Indonesia and Southeast Asia, they all have neighbors who are much bigger than they are. And in the long run, the advocates of Kanzuk, like the Imperial Federation people before them, would argue that the long-term survival of the English-speaking countries outside the United States is dependent upon their pulling together more tightly. Otherwise, runs this line of thought, they'll just be absorbed by their neighbors. And one other point, of course, I should make in terms of Toryism as a Toryism as a mode of thought. The Tory, of course, also very much believed in maintaining folklore and practices and customs and all that kind of thing. But I mentioned Young England. There was a similar group after Disraeli died. When Disraeli died, Queen Victoria sent a bunch of primroses to the funeral with the notation, his favorite flower. Now, as I understand it, she was actually referring to her late husband, Prince Albert's favorite flower. But because she had said it, people identified it with Disraeli. And that was the origin of what was called the Primrose League. And the Primrose League was basically, it lasted until the 1980s. And basically, what it was an attempt to keep the Conservative Party on the track that Disraeli had for it. Now, in the 1890s, the so-called Yellow 90s, you also had, speaking of Tories, the Neo-Jacobite revival. And out of that came things like the Society of King Charles the Martyr and the Order of the White Rose, which is today represented by the Royal Stewart Society, whose tie I'm wearing. And I'm wearing the white rose on my lapel, but I could as easily wear the pin of the Society of King Charles the Martyr, which I certainly will wear on January 30th. World War II came. World War One, the Depression, World War II, which forced the Conservative Party into national coalition governments. And in the end, led to traditional Toryism being pushed out of the Conservative Party. There are several groups. The Monday Club comes to mind, under the leadership of Sir John Biggs Davison, who was certainly one of the great Tories of the last half of the 20th century, and a very devout Catholic. There were attempts to try to push the Tories back in the Conservative Party into a more Tory direction. And there are groups of that sort right now. Uh, the other thing I should mention at this point, people that are called red Tories, both in England and Canada. And these are people who, again, are very much for traditional Tory beliefs, especially in the role of the church, the state, the church, and the community to take care of its least fortunate members. You see, Toryism, in addition to everything else, it was against industrialization and it was very agrarian. It was against the exploitation of the working classes. So you had a lot of groups. Well, when the Labor Party first emerged in the 19th century, before they went Marxist, they were often called the New Tories. And sure enough, uh, in a lot of ways, Tory thinking, especially red Tory thinking, parallels Catholic social teaching, and for the same reasons. Um, and again, in the course of the 19th century, uh, although William Morris went into socialism, his roots were the neo-medievalism and all that of the Tories. Uh, you had the arts and crafts movement, you had things like that, all vaguely connected with the Tory ideology. Today, there are a few pressure groups that are pushing for it in Britain and Canada, not many. Now, in the United States, in America, we we didn't really have after the Loyalists left us in 1783. We didn't have a Tory tradition as such, but we did produce a few Tories. But they were never a major group. You had some individuals who would count as Tories. And in the 20th century, you had people like Ralph Adams Cram, the great architect, T.S. Eliot, who we spoke of before. But they were writers, they were intellectuals, etc., but they didn't have a mass following. And in fact, American conservatism, even if it is very cultural, a la the great uh, Russell Kirk, has to justify itself in terms of adherence to the Whig Revolution of 1688. And that kind of view also justifies the Revolution of 1776 for the same reasons. And they justify 1688 because of its close connection with 1776. So while there are Tories in the United States, they've always been very much of a disadvantage because our roots are so Whig. And yet ultimately the Whig experiment can't really win. I mean, the problem is it's rather like an individual. Um, you have two different ways you try to treat the patient. You manage to avoid having him treated in one given way, but the problem is that way is the way that'll work. The fellow who has the other way that'll kill the guy eventually, he wins. He's won. Arsenic will cancel out strychnine. He's sure of it. And so the patient gets sicker and sicker and sicker, but at least that other answer is kept away, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So we're free of that. We're free of that antidote, and we'll keep using the arsenic. And eventually, of course, the patient dies, but at least he dies antidote free.
Gosh. Hmm.
Well, similarly, it's another old joke of that sort. The operation was a complete success, although the patient died.
Right.
So liberalism, Whiggery is a bit like that. And I mean, in a certain sense, the distributists, the guild socialists, they actually were all hearkening back to the original Tories, which distinction our friend makes when he says, I'm not talking about a political party. Another individual who saw the necessary integral relationship between Catholicism and real Toryism was George Wyndham, who was a friend of Belloch's, uh, Chief Secretary of Ireland under the last Tory administration, who was very successful in reconciling the Irish to the British. But of course, he was put out. The Liberal Party won. They pushed for home rule, and the result was that on the verge of World War I, Ireland was on the verge of civil war. That was delayed for a few years by the First War, but then you had 1916 and then a full-blown civil war in Ireland. So I think that is a fairly, to answer his question, would I consider myself a Tory? Well, as far as the English-speaking world goes, yeah, I can't think of another word that would suit me better.
All right. That's all you needed to say, Charles. No, just kidding. Just kidding.
You see, that's the kind of thing where, you'll come up with something. I give a one-word answer, they go, all right, so moving on.
Yeah, exactly.
When it's plainly insufficient.
Yeah.
Do you feel that JFK's assassination was a conspiracy? And I say yes. All right, so moving along.
Yeah.
You don't just leave it like that.
Yeah.
But I'm
No, go on.
no. The other thing too that also when you're thinking of American conservatism and all that, conservatism as such historically in any country, not just the Anglosphere, is often successive. You'll have one revolution, and then you'll have another revolution later on, and a number of the proponents of the first revolution oppose the second revolution, or the third, or the fourth. So today's revolutionaries are very often tomorrow's conservatives, you see. And you do see that illustrated in our own country in the question of the Civil War, the Second Civil War, the war between the states, the War of Northern Aggression, the War of the Rebellion, etc. Because in that conflict, the Southerners very much saw themselves as being in the same role as the revolutionaries of 1776. And yet they're often considered conservatives because they were trying to conserve a Southern way of life that they felt was being threatened by outside aggressors. They were defeated, of course, and then the deeply divided countries slowly came back together, actually rapidly, over a mutual acceptance of each side treasuring its symbols. But it's from that came what people would call a myth today. But it's no more a myth than the idea that you're going to get sanity out of a ballot box. In fact, it's much truer. But it was what they call the myth of the lost cause. And that's an important thing in understanding the American mindset because the South was the only part of the United States that really was ever devastated as a result of war. And it was devastated, brought to its knees, absolutely wrecked. And that gave to Southern literature a tragic sense that's pretty much lacking in most of American literature. Most American literature always goes to the happy ending. Southern literature, no. Somebody like William Faulkner or Flannery O'Connor is quite content with an unhappy ending.
What about the Harlem Renaissance?
Well, that was in Harlem. That's up north.
Okay, I guess they
How
don't.
about the Harlem?
Uh,
How about the Harlem Globetrotters?
okay.
How about Italian Harlem? How about Spanish Harlem? You know, there's a rose that grows in Spanish Harlem.
Yes,
Did you know
yes.
that?
I know
Did
that.
you know there's a rose that grows there? Did you? But you know, why keep your attention up on Harlem at the northern end of Manhattan? Look south to the Village. Look down to Sullivan Street.
Okay.
See, there's a fellow there, Mr. Cacciatore, has a place on Sullivan Street across from the medical center.
Ah, I know that place.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
You know, Sergeant O'Leary works there as a bartender at night.
Yeah, I know. John, too. John at the
Ah,
bar is a friend of mine. He gets me my drinks for
Gets me
free.
drinks for free. Doesn't he just? You know, when I was a cadet at NMI in Roswell, there was a bar nearby called The Claim. And the bartender was a man named John. He was a very funny man. Now, I was not supposed to be served as a cadet, but it was one of the very few places in town where I could get a drink. And there was an Irish waitress named Molly, and she was from Ireland. You know, the 2 years I was there, she sold me Irish sweepstake tickets each time, so I felt like I was contributing to the old sod. But John, of course, would get me what in those days was my favorite drink, rum and Coke, because I could conceal it, you see. And they bring it to me in a Coke glass. So
Got
if
it.
anybody from the Institute should stick their heads in. Anyway, I would incessantly sing John at the bar as a friend of mine. He gives me my drinks for free. And he would always respond, half that's true.
That's good.
I leave you to figure out which of the two.
Yes. All right, we're out of time. That's it for this episode. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, especially all the stuff on Toryism. It was fascinating.
But shouldn't we tell them what's waiting for them next week?
Death.
Well, or birdseed.
Or bird. No,
No, it's worse than death. It's Candlemas.
Candlemas, yes.
Because, you know, well, the death of Charles I, of course, is coming up on Tuesday, the day of the Chew. Charlemagne's Day is tomorrow, Sunday. Oh, so sorry, the 29th is Monday. Yes, so the 30th is King Charles's Day is January 30th, and also Marlene Prince Charlie's death day, as it turns out, on Tuesday. Then comes the 31st on Wednesday. Thursday night, February the 1st, Candlemas Eve. Candlemas Eve, ladies and gentlemen, apart from being spooky, it also means you'll need to take down your decorations for Christmas if you still got them up. As the Tory Cavalier poet Robert Herrick wrote, and I think he knew what he was talking about. He said, and I quote, let's see. Here it is. Ceremony upon Candlemas Eve. Down with the rosemary and so, down with the bays and mistletoe, down with the holly, ivy, all, wherewith ye dress the Christmas hall, that so the superstitious find not one least branch there left behind. For look, how many leaves there be neglected there, maids, trust to me, so many goblins shall ye see. So if you don't want to see any goblins on Candlemas Eve, ladies and gentlemen, everything's got to go. The next day is Candlemas, the feast of the purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the presentation of our Lord, and whether you're Latin or Byzantine, Trad or Novus Ordo, candles at Candlemas. And those blessed candles you'll bring home for all the year. But of course, it's also, because tomorrow is Septuagesima Sunday, it is the beginning of Carnival, Mardi Gras, Shrovetide. 2 weeks of you enjoying yourself, unless, of course, you're Byzantine, in which case tomorrow is Meat Fair Sunday. No, it's not. That'll be Sexagesima. No, you're all right. You got another week. Enjoy, entertain, be happy.
And remember,
Mardi Gras,
if it's Monday,
it's off the menu.
And the soul you save
may be your own.
See you next time, everyone.
God bless you.